What is going on, you guys? Today I have another super quick episode for you. This one is from a guy named Mark Tilbury, and the video title is 7 Things You Should Avoid If You Want to Be Rich. Let's hop into it.
If you don't want to be like everyone else, then you have to make the sacrifices others aren't willing to make. That's what my mentor told me when I was in my early 20s, and it stuck with me ever since. I started out with no
you do the same thing everyone else does, and you get the same results that they get.
qualifications and no money, but still managed to become a multi-millionaire. And a big part of that was down to avoiding the 7 things I'm going to be sharing with you today. The first thing to avoid is working for only money. Imagine for a moment that you got a boring but well-paid job. You quickly start stacking some nice cash as your earnings grow. Your friends will think that you're absolutely killing it, and your parents will probably be pretty.
And being in your comfort zone, I heard this today actually, salary is one of the biggest killers of visions and dreams, right? So if you actually want to be really fulfilled, enjoying your life, probably avoid a salary, because that's the comfort zone, right? Like, you got the cushy pillow, right? He's talking about it's great pay. I forget the name of it, but it's like the golden salary, but something like that. And everyone else is like, wow, you're doing such a great job, John. Your parents, your family, etc. So you've got you think well, why would I leave the job? But again, he's about to talk about it.
Now too. However, over time, your earning potential would start to plateau. This is path A. Now, imagine instead you get a challenging but lower paid job. You might struggle for a couple of years as you improve and adapt. You may even struggle to pay the bills. Your friends will probably think you're falling behind, and your parents may not agree with the path you've taken. However, over time, your earning potential will start going through the roof. This is path B. So what's the difference between these two examples? Well, path A prioritizes money early on, whereas path B prioritizes 2 key things: skills and equity. Every self-made millionaire I know has followed path B, as it's the only way to build that kind of wealth. As I mentioned, I left school at 16.
And he might say it here, but path A is basically caring what everyone else thinks. And path B is getting over it. Not caring what everybody else thinks. Caring about people, but not what they think. So you can build those skills and that equity to reach the vision, your dream life.
With no qualifications. However, I immediately went out looking for jobs and actually got offered more than 5 opportunities. So I had a big decision to make. Which should I choose? I decided to become a carpenter's apprentice. The pay wasn't great, but I knew the skills I'd learned would be extremely valuable, so I prioritised those. There was no way I was going to get equity in the business, but at least I was working for more than just money. That job taught me a lot, and although I was forced to quit after being relentlessly bullied by my manager, I still use many of those skills today when I'm designing my best-selling brand of radio-controlled planes that I sell across the world. By learning a wide range of high-income skills, it makes it almost impossible for you to ever be broke again, as you become your greatest asset. I like to think every job I had when I was younger added to my skill set, like a Swiss Army knife. Nowadays, I'd recommend prioritizing online-based high-income skills such as copywriting, video editing, and coding. The demand for these skills is only growing, and I can speak from experience that there is a huge skill shortage at the moment. Sure, there are lots of people doing those things. However, 99% of them are just not up to standard. Honestly, your competition really isn't that tough. Now, let's move on to the second thing, equity. This just means owning a percentage of a business so you can benefit from the profits. My radio control model brand is a perfect example of this. You can gain equity in a few different ways. The most obvious way, and the way I did it, was to start the business myself. However, you can also gain it by working for it if you're extremely skilled in certain areas. This is known as sweat equity. Lastly, you can purchase equity in certain businesses, although I wouldn't recommend this as much unless you have the skills that can help accelerate that business forward. My friend Simon Squibb often goes around in public telling people to start their own businesses or ask for equity from their boss. While I 100% agree with the sentiment, you need to have some self-awareness with this. Firstly, it's worthwhile working for someone to gain skills before starting a business of your own. Secondly, you need to be realistic. I didn't think for a moment that I'd get equity in the carpentry business when I was an apprentice. So when you ask, make sure you have a solid case for why you deserve it and how you can add value to the business instead of just taking from it. You need to first focus on becoming someone worthy of equity. The main takeaway.
Another important point too, I heard this the other day, which was kind of interesting. There was a guy in a podcast that I was listening to, and he was talking about how he was good at the branding and marketing part, but he wasn't as good at the sales part, and he wanted to do sales coaching. So he actually hired a sales expert to do the coaching. So like, he wasn't necessarily the man doing everything, but he found someone who filled the gap in his knowledge. So it wasn't like two guys that were good at the same thing. It was two guys that basically supported each other. Like they filled in each other's weaknesses and made up for it with their strengths, right? So, I mean, that's a good thing. And then what he's talking about, of course, like I know guys who have built the Swiss Army knife, right, where they were doing copywriting, and then they got into sales, and then they got into coaching, and then they started doing different things, and they got to the point where it was like marketing and all this other stuff. So they had such a good skill set that they could easily like do their own kind of business in whatever creative way that they wanted, right? So basically, it was easy for them. They're kind of unstoppable and like a savage when it came to building wealth and finances, because they would kind of do it like however they wanted. So that's good to know. You can have that freedom when you build those skills.
Here is that too many people get blinded by money, forgetting the importance of skills and equity. This is the biggest trap. The more you obsess over earning just money, the less you'll likely make in the long run. The second thing to avoid is buying a luxury lifestyle. Picture yourself cruising through Dubai's sun-drenched streets in a bright yellow Lamborghini. You pull up to a swanky restaurant and order a $500 fillet steak without batting an eyelid. How does imagining that lifestyle make you feel? Pretty successful, right? Well, here's the truth. Most people you see living this way are far from successful. The majority are paying for cars they can't.
Well, I mean, think about it. Like there's definitely more than two types of guys, but let's just use the example here. There's two types of guys. One is showing off because he wants the validation, is insecure, although he's doing decent financially. So basically, he's always leading with his wallet. Like, oh, look at me in my Balenciaga t-shirt with holes in it the holes were put in it as a new t-shirt, by the way, right? Or let me rent a Ferrari or a helicopter or whatever to take pictures in front of for my Instagram or my dating apps, right? And basically what it's doing, right, is the exact opposite of the billionaire, right? Or the guy who actually knows what he's doing, like because he doesn't need to show off. Right, he's quiet. It's like a quiet confidence. That's usually the guy who's really wealthy, and he's in like a hat, in a hoodie, and you would never guess, right? Because he's not, flashing his Rolex or all this other stuff, right? So he's making a good point here.
Taking trips to Dubai on credit cards they'll spend 5 months paying off, and ordering steaks at Salt Bay's restaurant that leave them with a bill they can't handle. These people are living a lie, pretending to be rich while drowning in debt. It's all smoke and mirrors, as it's much easier to impress others on social media than build real wealth. Seeing people live these luxury lifestyles might tempt you to start playing the flexing game too, as you feel like everyone is living a better life than you. However, this is far from the reality. In fact, 37% of Americans can't afford unexpected expenses over $400. 39% worry they can't pay their bills, and 60% of American households can't afford to buy a new car. Once you've made your millions, you can buy whatever you want. That's the point of becoming wealthy. However, in the early days, you can't live like a king and build wealth.
Well, and that brings it back to that point, right? It's like there's a lot of people who maybe they were able to make their wealth or their millions or their billions once, but it takes a whole different kind of person to be able to do it again. Like, let's say that you lost it all for some reason. There's one person that can't recreate that, and there's one person that can recreate it or even do something new with their skill sets and get all that wealth back and then some, right? And he was talking about something like the luxury lifestyle. Like, people can do that too with like lifestyle creep. Like, oh, they keep making like a little bit more money, and then they keep spending too much. Like, they're overspending, right? Like, oh, I mean, they made a little more money, so they get a nicer apartment, a nicer car, a nicer this and that. And to some extent, you can do that a little bit, but it's obviously like unwise, right? Because if you keep creeping up in your lifestyle as your expenses go up, you're basically going to still be broke as you go up, right? So it's worth keeping in mind.
Same time. Instead of buying depreciating items like flashy cars, designer clothes, and dining in expensive restaurants, invest in assets such as stocks, shares, crypto, and real estate. These assets will increase in value and generate income that you can then use to do whatever you want. The third thing to...
By the way, if you don't know, depreciating assets mean that they go down in value. So like your hypercar or your supercar or your Bugatti, right? Like you can be like, oh, but bro, they look cool. Just know that it's basically like a giant waste of money, right? I mean, and you could have invested in one of those other things that he mentioned and make your money work for you so you can actually multiply your money, right? So like one's just going down the drain and the car is going to be worth less and less. So even if you wanted to sell it, you'll sell it for less because it's going down in value. When you could put it somewhere else where it'll grow in value, right? So
avoid is doing everything yourself. You might be really great at what you do, but no matter how hard you try, you'll never be able to outcompete a group of talented people working together. Look at anyone who's made it big in sports or business. If you do some digging, you'll see they all had help. Let's take Elon Musk as an example. On the surface, it might appear like he's a genius entrepreneur who's achieved everything single-handedly. However, that couldn't be further from the truth. He was part of the group that launched PayPal. When eBay acquired PayPal for $1.5 billion in 2002, these newly wealthy tech experts spread across the industry like a virus. Now they're known as the PayPal Mafia, as they've become such a powerful group. After leaving PayPal, they started many successful companies. These include big names like YouTube, Yelp, LinkedIn, and SpaceX. They often invest in each other's projects and give advice. But what if you're not aiming to launch the next billion-dollar company and instead just want to earn some extra money with a side hustle? Well, a lot of older business owners are kind of lost when it comes to everything tech-based and using the internet for their companies. I mean, a lot of them don't even know there's online tools for literally everything, whether it's managing your team, handling invoices.
By the way, that's a good point too. Like there's something he didn't mention there was, not having too much of an ego. Number one, to ask for help or build a team, right? And it has to be a team of people you trust. Also, best if it's a team of people where they'll hold you accountable, give you raw, truth, right? Like they're not going to sugarcoat things. They're going to give you constructive criticism, and also they're going to fill in your skill gaps, like what we talked about earlier. Like you're good at this, he's good at this. Not you're good at the same thing, and you both don't know how to do this other thing. And then also another key point to that is that a lot of guys who start their own business, they get to a point where they're too busy, right? And they have all these excuses for why they don't have time for things. But they seem to forget that they probably started a business because they were interested in having financial and time freedom. And so once they get big enough, they have an ego and they're too stubborn to start delegating tasks, like finding people who can do those tasks for him so he can do the bigger, higher leverage tasks, rather than him always doing everything himself and giving all these excuses why he can't, make time for things because he's working 80, 120 hours, whatever. Like, it's not a flex, right? Like, you get and I like Gary Vee, right? But it's not a flex when it's like hard work is important, but you have to work hard and smart, right? You're basically the same as the construction worker working 12, 16-hour days, not getting paid enough with the doctor, right? At that point, sure, it's like an admirable job or skill, right? But you're doing all that for what? Like the pat on the back. Oh man, you work so hard. But you can't invest into your other areas of your life, like your family, your friends, dating, building a family. Like, what's it all for at the end of the day? Who do you have to share it with? Just a question to keep in mind.
Keeping track of projects or even building a website. I don't blame them, as back in the day, we didn't have any of these things, but now the younger generation has a real advantage. So if these older business owners don't know how to do a lot of this online stuff, and they understand they can't do everything themselves, guess who they need? You. You can help them bring their businesses into the 21st century and make a lot of money in the process. The fourth thing to avoid is having too many input.
And by the way, one last thing about having a team, right? Or building up your business to that level where you need to start delegating too. I heard this guy, he's another YouTuber named Rob the Bank. I haven't really listened to any of his content yet. Probably do a little bit more to check him out. But he made a really good point. He said, because he was really successful, and I think he's already sold his first business at the very least. And he was saying that there's a point where maybe he had a mindset around I didn't want. There was a time where I thought I didn't want to hire someone that was younger than me, because they wouldn't know as much, right? But he flipped his mindset, right, and dropped his ego around it, right? So like it doesn't matter what age, background, if they're older, younger, whatever, right? He was saying there's always something to learn from somebody, right? And so getting rid of his ego, before he was like, oh, like what's this young guy going to teach me, right? Like I'm already doing well, blah blah blah. But now he was like, he found like a young guy who's actually like really helping him succeed in, I believe, one of his businesses because he has a particular skill set and it's like a newer market, newer skill set, right? So like, you have to remember that too, like investing in the younger generation as well, like not having an ego around, like, oh, what's this kid know, right? So that was a great point that guy Rob the Bank brought up.
Do you ever feel like you're being pulled in a million different directions? This happens with everything in life, from side hustles to fitness training. Everyone seems to have a different opinion on what you should be focusing on. It can look a little bit like this.
Are you over 40 and want to master AI tools? I got you.
This is you. And these are the people telling you what they think you should be focusing on. For the sake of simplicity, let's just call them inputs. All these inputs create hundreds of paths you could follow, like becoming a doctor, entrepreneur, joining a family business, getting a stable 9-to-5 job, traveling, and having a family. Let's call these your potential paths. The sheer number of these pathways can create something called cognitive overload, which is where your brain simply can't cope with the overwhelming amount of information and choices. So what's the solution? Well, I've always...
I guess you could also call it, or part of it would be option paralysis. Like, oh, it's like you have a bunch of options in front of you in a restaurant. It's like, oh, which one do I choose? Rather than just it being maybe a little bit more simple.
Started with my end destination in mind and worked backwards. Of course, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do in the future. However, I had a decent idea. I then made sure to only listen to inputs that helped me reach those targets. The clearer your goal, the easier.
So reverse engineering the goal around where you want to go and getting as clear as you can over time, even if it's not like super clear at the beginning, you kind of bring it down to where it's more clear over time. So reiterate on the vision or the goal, and then also only listening to mentors who have the result you want in that area, right? And that means you can have more than one, right? Like this guy has the dating life that you want, take advice from him. This guy has a wife and kids, right? And that's what you want, take advice from him, not the single guy. Right? Not the guy who's always, not doing well with dating, or the guy who's, always like sleeping around, right? Like, again, you model the advice from the person that's got it, right? So if someone has done well in a particular kind of business you want to do, this is a really important, like, nuanced point, but don't look at what they're doing now that they're so successful. Look at what they're doing or what they did in the beginning to get started and become successful, and also take into consideration the mistakes that they made then, so you know how to start getting in their direction, right? So again, modeling, and that could be dating from this guy, business from this guy, fitness from this guy, health, like your nutrition from this other person, right? So just keep that in mind.
It becomes to select the right inputs to help you achieve it. So limit the number of opinions you receive and prioritize quality over quantity. Most people have too many opinions being thrown at them, but not from experts.
Yeah, there's like a saying called opinions are like buttholes, and everybody's got one. So
Cut out general opinions and instead seek expert advice. This could come from a mentor, someone successful in your field, or even educational videos from experts like myself. By doing this, you'll get more valuable, focused, and specific guidance for your end goal. Remember, even when you work your way backwards, you still don't need to know everything at once. Fully listen and implement what you learn from an input, and then when you're facing another challenge, you can seek out more inputs that'll help you overcome it. If you don't do this, then you'll get mental fatigue, which can lead to decision paralysis, where you find yourself unable to take action or move forward. Some people might even mistake this for being lazy, but in reality, your brain just gets overwhelmed. The fifth thing to avoid is being...
It could also be not lazy, but overwhelmed, and it could be fear-based, right? Like you're afraid of what to do, afraid to make the wrong choice. So you're overthinking, analyzing. You're like the meme with the guy, and he's like, and there's all the math equations going on behind him.
Ego-driven. Let me start by saying this. Arrogant people won't even finish this video. They think they already know everything, so why bother sticking around? But that's exactly the problem. Arrogance blinds you to the opportunities that could genuinely change your life. Ego-driven people are often...
And by the way, that would be what would apply to what the Rob the Bank guy said about a younger person, or like oh, why would I listen to them, right? Like, oh, I'm already doing well. Like, there's no way I could learn anything, right? And you're just being stubborn, ego driven.
Too focused on the big picture, constantly dreaming of the end goal. This might sound productive, but it's a dangerous trap. When you're always looking too far ahead, you end up overlooking the small but crucial steps that lead to true success. For example, some might be tempted to scroll through this video just to see all 7 things rather than sitting down and actually absorbing the knowledge in each one. But by doing so, they miss out on the valuable insights that could fast track their journey. When you're too egotistical, you start to believe that you don't need advice from others, especially those who might know more than you. You might dismiss the wisdom of people who have already walked the path that you're trying to take. But here's the truth. True wealth isn't just about being confident. It's about having the humility to keep learning, to understand that you don't know it all. And that's where the real growth happens. The more you learn, the more you realize how much you don't know. This is
Always remain a student. Always remain like clay, right? And again, like not taking everybody's opinions, because opinions are like buttholes. Everyone has one, right? But being moldable and always a student, learning from the right people, the right mentors, not being stubborn.
the iceberg principle. What you know is just the tip of the iceberg. The massive chunk of knowledge is underneath the surface. That's what truly matters, and arrogance makes you forget that it's even there. In short, arrogance is a silent wealth killer. It convinces you that you're too good to learn, too smart to listen, and too important to take the small steps that lead to greatness. The sixth
And one last thing there, actually, because he was saying like worrying too much about like the big goals, like all the way down in the future. That's actually something that, because if you're focused on too much on the past or the future, you're never present, right? So like there's like the small step you can take that's in front of you. You're too worried about this thing all the way down here, but you're not focused on what's actually in front of you. So you'll probably miss things and not be present, and it'll probably be harder for you to reach the results that you want because of that.
thing to avoid is passing the blame. One of my favourite Chinese proverbs is, the man who blames others has a long way on his journey to go. The man who blames himself is halfway there. The man who blames no one has already arrived. In front of me, I have two objects, a magnifying glass and a mirror. In life, you're going to have to choose to reach for either of these on a daily basis. You might be thinking, Mark's gone mad. But let me explain. If you choose to pick up the magnifying glass, it gives you the ability to hyper-focus on other people. This is a dangerous path, as it leads to the blame game. Look, I do kind of get it. When anything goes wrong in life, it's natural to want to pass the blame onto someone else. Anyone but yourself. I'm sure there's been times when you've blamed your teacher for a test you failed, even though you spent more time binge watching Netflix than actually studying. Or maybe you passed the blame onto the traffic for being late, even though you left the house 10 minutes later than you should have. But here's the thing, these small instances of blame don't stay small. Over time, they grow into a habit that's hard to break free from. I'm sure you've seen people say stuff like, the government hates young people, the system is rigged against people like me, my boss doesn't like me, I'm not rich enough to start a business, and life didn't give me the right opportunities.
They're a victim. You can choose to keep a victim mindset or move out of it. Take accountability, focus on what you can control to live and move towards the life that you actually want.
The more you reach for the magnifying glass, the bigger your excuses become. However, if you pick the mirror, then you instead
It's lacking accountability, basically.
focus on the stuff you can actually control, your own thoughts and actions. So to embody the wisdom of the Chinese proverb, to be the person who has already arrived at their destination, you need to pick up the mirror, not the magnifying glass. The seventh thing to avoid is staying static. This is your comfort zone, where you retreat seeking safety and security. Notice how there are no gaps in this circle, almost like a self-imposed prison with no...
And by the way, I don't know if it's a Chinese proverb or not, but the thing about like always remaining a student, not being arrogant and stubborn, there's another saying around that. It's like, all I know is that I don't know, or the more that I learn, the more wisdom that I gain, the more that I learn that I don't know anything, right? Because there's always like, whoa, like your world continues to expand the more you learn, and you realize like, man, like there's so much I don't know. So it's always better to be a student of life, basically.
way out and no way to grow. If you're currently here, then you're not alone. According to some studies, over half of Brits don't leave their comfort zone, and 45% of them are worried that one day they might regret it. So what can you do to break out of this prison? Well, you need to expand the circle. This can be really difficult when our minds are conditioned to avoid taking risks, but it's something I learned at an early age.
And by the way, a translation for that, because he didn't quite get into it, but like our minds are trained to avoid risk. like our brains are trained to protect us, like biologically, like our brain is always trying to protect us, keep us safe. So it's like almost operating out of fear. And sometimes it does too much, right? Like you need to be like, all right, it's all right. Like it's like almost like talking to a younger child, right? Like no, it's okay. I got this, right? And being able to take some risks or calculated risks so you can get out of your comfort zone, like what he's saying.
Show you how I did it. When I was younger, my comfort zone was narrow. School, studying subjects I wasn't good at, like maths and English. The traditional education system didn't suit me. I didn't want to be a banker, doctor or lawyer. I wanted something more hands-on. So I stepped out of my comfort zone and pursued the apprenticeship I mentioned earlier. This created a new space for me, but I wasn't satisfied yet. I knew I needed more from life, so I started experimenting with side hustles, which pushed me further into unfamiliar territory. Suddenly, the world was full of possibilities. The next step was clear: starting my own business. This was a pivotal moment requiring a big risk, a bank loan. It was the best decision that I ever made. To expand my empire further, I travelled to China in search of a manufacturer for my own brand of radio control models. Despite the language and cultural barriers, I managed to build valuable connections. I ran my business for many years and enjoyed success, but eventually I felt complacent. My family was happy, my bank was happy, but my mind wasn't. I wanted more. So I expanded my comfort zone again and started posting videos on YouTube at the age of 53. I'd seen so many people on YouTube faking it, so I wanted to share my knowledge and help others who, like me, didn't fit the traditional path. Although...
And by the way, because the victim mindset, or like, oh, like I don't have control over anything in my life, the lack of accountability, right? Like he just said something really great there, right? It's always learning, student of life. And basically, like the YouTube thing at the age of, I think it was 53, he said. Because you can be the guy who says, or the person who says, well, that's hard. Like an old dog can't learn new tricks. Or you can be the person who's like, no, like life's an adventure. Let's give it a try, right? Like, no, I can always learn something new. You see the difference?
Wanted to grow their wealth and feel more secure in life. Remember, you can expand your comfort zone as much as you want. This space is infinite, but you have to claim it for yourself. If you don't push beyond your current boundaries, you'll miss out on all the possibilities that could have been yours. If you want to learn what to do every time you get paid, then I'll leave that video right up there, but don't click on it just yet. Make sure to subscribe if you want to grow your wealth, okay? I'll see you.
So one last thing, like if you keep that circle of like the comfort zone expanding in mind, like all your growth lies outside of the comfort zone. Right, so every time you expand, basically, it was on like a Chris Williamson podcast. It was like blowing up on social media, but it was like the magic that you've been looking for, or the success, the results you've been looking for, lies on the other side of your comfort zone, or like what you've been avoiding, basically. So as soon as you start stepping out more and more, you can always venture out a little farther each time, but that way you're gonna reach the life that you really want, basically. Thank you for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. I hope you gained some value out of this, and I will see you in the next one. You got this, bro.